Hello. Okay, so let's now start our class. So let's pray. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you, good Lord, for this afternoon you've given to us. Thank you, Lord, sa blessings you have showered upon us. Guide us today, Lord, as we discuss our lesson about individual psychology and analytical psychology, Lord. Give us wisdom, understanding, and strength. And Lord, I just want to bring you back all the glory and honor in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so good afternoon everyone and welcome back sa aton nga class. So let's continue with our discussion. Last time, sang Tuesday, I finished discussing ang kay Freud and also what makes a theory, and why do we need to study personality, ano ang personality about. So this time, let's continue with the part 1 of this week naton nga lesson. So, by the way, I'm recording this session. So, para those na hindi ka-attend, at least they have a reference. Okay? Nga tanawon nila. Sige. So, let's first start with Individual Psychology by Alfred Adler. So, si Adler, do siya gid ando mambag kung naging kontra gid ni Freud kay they had the fallout when it comes to the theories, wala mga gimpambutang ni Freud siya nga theory. So, ang theory nga individual psychology was born out of deflecting from Freud's main theory nga psychoanalytical theory. So, let's look into what Adler's theory is about. So, here are his main tenets, so main points. So, number 1, ang iya nga gin-divide into anom nga parts. So, main tenets yang number 1, the one dynamic force behind people's behavior is striving for success or superiority. Number 2, people's subjective perception shape their behavior and personality. Number 3, personality is unified and self-consistent. Number 4, the value of all human activity must be seen from the viewpoint of social interest. Number 5, the self-consistent personality structure develops into a person's style of life. And number 6, style of life is modeled by people's creative power. So, his theory focused on the uniqueness of each person and not by biological motives and goals ascribed by Freud. So, more on, na tawag ng individual psychology, gani, kay he's more focused on the individual. And, para sa iya, ang individual is a social being. So, one cannot live without other human beings. And, like I said, personality is shaped by people's unique social environments and interaction. So, mas ga-emphasize siya sa social part sang aton nga development rather than ang biological. And the conscious is the core of personality are actively involved in creating themselves and directing their future. So, unlike kay Freud na mas ga-focus gid sa unconscious, for him, ang core sang aton nga personality is conscious. Basically, we are aware and we are actively involved in creating themselves and creating ourselves and of course, directing our future. So, ang mga ganit sa first main tenet that the one dynamic force behind people's behavior is the striving for success or superiority. So, hambalya, ang aton motivation or ang aton nga present behavior is caused by or we are motivated because we are striving for success or superiority. We are striving for something in the future. So, though, compared to sang last time, kung si Freud do more causality siya, si Adler do more teleological siya. Okay? So, sa number 2 naman, don't worry, may detailed pa na siya sa key terms. So, sa number 2, nga people's subjective perception is shaped by their behavior and personality. So, kita, ambal ni Adler, ang aton nga behavior is based on our perceptions sa world around us naton. So, for him, people create fictions. Okay, fictions are people's expectation of the future. Okay, so, ang aton nga present behavior is not only because we try to strive for success or superiority, but also we try to shape our behavior in the present by our subjective perceptions. And sa number 3 niya nga tenet, unlike kay Freud na gindivide niya into tatlo ang personality, ang id, ego, superego, para kay Adler, it's more of a unified and self-consistent nga self. So, butslingon, hindi siya divided, wala parts nga unconscious, and para sa iya, self-consistent siya. Okay? So, number 4, nga may tenet, the value of all human activity must be seen from the viewpoint of social interests. Since he said that human beings are social beings, and the healthiest way of striving is striving for success, which is gusto naton ang aton kapwa nga human being man is mag-excel man. So, it's more of social interest or ang ginatawag nga Gemeinschaftsgefühl. So, the self-consistent personality structure develops into a person's style of life. So, sa tenet number 5, since naghambal siya na ang personality naton is unified and self-consistent, it develops our own style of life or lifestyle. Kumbaga, ang person's style of life or lifestyle is the way we live our life. Okay? And dinahalin ang style of life naton. So, it is modeled by our creative power. So, we are free and we have the creative power, which is also based on our subjective experiences to create a suitable style of life for us. So, now, let's go and dive deep into the key terms. So, even though gamay lang din yung list ko and there are a lot of key terms pa sa book. So, I'll just discuss the important ones. So, striving for success and superiority. So, like I said, this is our main motivation as to why we do the things we do today. So, anong source na gusto natin mag-strive for success or mag-strive kita sa superiority? It's because of our inferiority feelings. So, what are those inferiority feelings? So, these are motivating forces in behavior, and to be human means that to feel oneself inferior. So, di na siya gastem. So, maybe because there is something wrong when we were born, though may ara nga things that may ara kita things nga do naman mga insecurities ta, maybe physically there's something wrong, or base sa aton mismo nga personality traits may something nga missing or wrong sa aton. So siguro nakuha na ni Adler ang amuna nga statement or amuna nga key term is because sa iya nga life man, he was a very sickly kid, and it caused him to be, kung hindi siya kahampang, or though he cannot live his life and somehow nagkaroon siya ng inferiority complex. So, kumbaga, in an attempt to hide those inferiority feelings naton, so, ga-compensate kita. So, compensation in his term means individual growth results from people's attempt to overcome real and imagined inferiorities. So, we try to compensate our inferiority feelings or the insecurities naton into something else. Okay, that's why we try to strive for success. So, that's why, for example, when we look into the mirror and sometimes we see our physical insecurities, we try to divert those physical insecurities into something more useful to compensate that. So, 'di ba, for example, like ang iban kung feeling mo sa self mo hindi ka attractive pero you try to compensate it through your study. So, alam ka man niya, doon na. So, those are just examples of it. So, ang feelings of inferiority gani ambal, it may be real or imagined. And what Adler called inferiority complex, this is poor opinions of oneself and feels helpless and unable to cope with the demands of life. So, this is our personal feelings of inferiority. And dinahalin ang aton nga feelings of inferiority. Din ang source, one is ang ganit physical, which is ang ginatawag ni Adler na organ inferiority. So, defective parts or organs of the body through person's effort to compensate for the defect or weakness. So, maybe you were born sickly, so kumaga may something wrong mismo sa organ nimo. Okay, so that's the way a person tried to compensate his defect or weakness. So, another source ng inferiority feelings is spoiling or pampering. So, this child naturally develops the idea that he is the most important person in any situation and that other people should always defer to him. When confronted with obstacles to gratification, a spoiled child comes to believe that he has some personal deficiency that is thwarting him to delay the gratification, tolerance, and no sense of autonomy. So, maybe tungod sa parenting, and if the child is spoiled, it causes him feelings of inferiority because he tends to question niya na hindi ko makuha ang gusto ko. So, sometimes ang inferiority complex niya nahimo nga superiority complex. The opposite, the feeling niya, siya naman ang ara sa babaw and he deserves it because he is, ang pagpapadako sa iya is spoiled. And another source of inferiority feelings is those kung nagdako ka sa neglect and rejection. So because of lack of security and love, the child develops feelings of worthlessness or even anger and view distrust with others. So, prime example gid ang mga street children and mga children in conflict with the law. So, they really have a sense of or feelings of worthlessness because ginapabayaan lang sila sa balay and so, it really develops their inferiority feelings. So, before Adler came to the term nga striving for success kag striving for superiority, ang first niyang term is amunang masculine protest. So, para siya, inferiority was akin to femininity. However, Adler widened and strengthened it to include a generalized idea that all mankind is inferior at birth and that inferiority has nothing to do with femininity, but it is the result of the hereditary condition followed after birth by feelings of being incomplete. So, that is for him masculine protest. So, That's why gin-change siya from masculine protest to striving for success and superiority because he now view it as general. Generally mankind is born inferior or has feelings of inferiority at birth. So like I said, those who were spoiled and pampered as a child, they grow and develop superiority complex. So a person may tend to overcompensate. It's the exaggeration of opinions of one's capability. So boasting, vanity, self-confidence, and a tendency to denigrate others. So not only lang sa pagiging spoiled or pagpadako sa child as spoiled, but maybe for example kung may insecurity ka, 'di ba? For example sa mga looks. So you try to compensate it with being smart, with your studies. But sometimes, smart mga intelligent people, 'di ba? Sila feeling sa sila gid ang pinakaalam and they can do no wrong, hindi sala. Kumaga wala gid sila kaagi sala sa ilang mga decisions. So and they try to look down on others. So that could also be a manifestation of superiority complex. Okay? So that's why for Adler, ang striving for success amo nang do healthy motivation, meanwhile ang striving for superiority amo na ang unhealthy. Okay, so ang striving for superiority or perfection, so for him, superiority means the ultimate goal towards which a person strives, an effort to perfect oneself and make himself complete or whole. Pero for him, though more individual and gina-isolate ng iya self from others. Ang view ni Adler when it comes to human beings is that human beings are social beings. And if one strives for superiority, so amo na nga though he tries to be perfect pero at the cost of isolating himself. Okay? So next term is subjective perception sa nga tenet ni Adler. So like I said, we form our own viewpoint based on our subjective perceptions, and para kay Adler, these are called fictions. So fictions is the manner in which they strive is not shaped by reality but their subjective perceptions of reality. So we tend to form our goals, we tend to form our motivation not because it is grounded by reality but because this is what we ideal, or this is based on our subjective perceptions of what reality should be. Okay? So may gani ginatawag si Adler nga fictional finalism. So for him, fictional finalism, people have an ultimate goal, a final state of being, and a need to move toward it according to their cognitive construct. So fictions are people's expectation of the future. Adler held that fictions guide behavior because people act as if these fictions are true. So Adler even criticized gani religion, as for him religion is also fiction. Kumbaga this is ang having faith to a higher being is a subjective perception of reality, or kung for example gapati na God has planned everything for you, 'di ba? So according kay Adler, so for him ang belief in that in religion is fiction, and somehow sa fictional finalism we have an ultimate goal, a final state that we need to move on. Okay? So that's why ang iyang theory is more teleological, Okay, so it's moving towards the future, and people are drawn towards their goals, purposes, and ideals. So, another that, in his third na tenet, so he said that, the personality is united, diba, and self-consistent. And he has this term, organ dialect. So, the organ dialect is the deficient organ that expresses the direction of the individual's goal. So, kumbaga, I think, ginamin niya man they are source of weakness or insecurity or feelings of inferiority. Amo na ang express ang aton nga goal. So, like I said, tong sa example ko nga kagina nga, sometimes, we have for example, may insecurity ka of not being attractive enough. So, ang organ, which is our face, it expresses the direction of what we should do. So, either, for example, you try to compensate it with your studies, or you try to improve man your status in life so that you can afford to change your face, 'di ba? Para maging attractive ka. So, do amo nang ginamin ni Adler. And of course, this is still based on our subjective perceptions of reality, okay, or fictions naton. So, balik pagid may dugang pagid ko di. Sa subjective perceptions, gali pagid class. So, like I said, may ara kita pagid safeguarding tendencies. So, ano ni siyang mga safeguarding tendencies? These safeguarding tendencies maintain a neurotic style of life and protect a person from public. So, though kind of equivalent ni siya sang defense mechanisms ni Freud. And para siya, there are 3 safeguarding tendencies. So, number 1 is excuses, which allows people to preserve their inflated sense of personal worth. Aggression, which may take a form of depreciating others' accomplishments, accusing others of being responsible for one's own failures, or self-accusation. And withdrawal, which can be expressed by psychologically moving backwards, standing still, hesitating, or constructing obstacles. So, these safeguarding tendencies protect us from our own insecurities, from our own feelings of inferiorities. Pero hambal gani ni Adler, these are neurotic, but lingon these are unhealthy defense mechanisms or safeguarding tendencies gani. So, sa social interest, so like I said, hambal gani ni Adler that we form ang goal naton, if we strive for success, is social interest. Okay, so what is social interest or Gemeinschaftsgefühl? So this is the feeling of oneness with all humanity. It implies membership in the social community of all people. So it is the individual's innate potential to cooperate with others to achieve personal and social goals. So that's why he said that the healthiest way or the healthiest naton nga behavior is if we move to social interest or Gemeinschaftsgefühl or striving for success. It means that we are trying to uplift one another instead of being insecure and try to project it using our inferiority and superiority complex. So, kumbaga, it's more on working together with kapwa nyo nga human being. So, kaya mo nang hambal ni Adler, we are all social being and we cannot live without one another. So, next is sa style of life niya nga tenet. So, ano ni siyang style of life? So, this is the creative flavor of a person's life. A person's goal, self-concept, feelings for others, and attitudes towards the world. And like I said, ang source sang aton style of life is aton nga creative power. So creative power is the dynamic concept implying movement, and this movement is the most salient characteristic of life. So, in the style of life, we express it through our different behavior patterns, and we develop a unique pattern of characteristic, behaviors, and habits, and somehow, the style of life, what Adler means here is this is our own personality. Okay? This is how we develop our own personality as own unique individuals. So, the creative power of the self. So, this is where we choose our personality and character. The person creates the style of life, creates himself, his personality, and his character. And how do we express or how do we get that creative power? It is the way the person interprets his heredity and environment form the basis of creative construction of his attitude towards life. That's why kung balikan ta to ang term ni Adler, ang aton creative power, this is based on our experiences and also based on the subjective perception naton of what reality is. So from creative power, okay, we are able to create our own style of life or our own personality, our own flavor, okay, and which he said that ang aton na nga mga behavior, ang aton nga motivation is tungod nga we are striving for success. Pero of course, there are maladaptive na style of life. So, amo nang ginatawag nga mistaken styles of life. So, an individual who seeks personal superiority and self-goal only suffers superiority complex. This is from a mistaken style of life. And he who is overwhelmed by feelings of inferiority suffers from inferiority complex. And he classified, 4 types of people according to their level of social interest. So, the higher the social interest nimo, the more healthy your personality is. So, number one, yung maladaptive or mistaken style of life is the ruling type. So, they seek to dominate others. They may actively confront life's problems in a selfish way. They become delinquents, tyrants, and sadists. So, there is what he called depreciation complex, where people express their sense of superiority over others by belittling them. So, number 2 is the getting type. So, it's more on leaning on others, being dependent. They adopt a passive attitude towards life and become user-friendly. Ang ginaminding becoming user-friendly is gapanggamit sila others. So, they use others para dara lang sila mag-depend sa amo ng tao. So, getting type, amo na sila hindi sila ka-live independently without another person. So, number 3 is the avoiding type. So, they try not to deal with problems, thereby avoiding the possibility of defeat, and tends to be isolated and may strike others as cold and avoids commitment. Amo naman ni ang mga avoiding types, amo naman yang try to isolate themselves. They don't want to work with others. They are uncooperative because of the lack of trust niya with others. So, healthy style of life. So, anong healthy style of life? Amo ning pinakataas ang social interest. So, according to Adler, the lifestyle is adaptive, therefore the person is said to be socially useful type. The person must act in ways beneficial to others. Those persons who taught us how to see, how to think, and how to feel, such persons have a well-developed sense of social interest. Okay, so, dapat, according kay Adler, ang style of life must be adaptive to the ways or to the environment. If naging restrictive ang aton style of life, dara na dagagwa ang aton nga mga mistaken styles of life or ang mga styles of life that do not that do not adapt sa situation or environment. Okay, so amo tong tatlo, ang ruling, ang avoiding, kag ang getting. So, ang description niya gani sa healthy style of life, amo na ang style of life that is, ang goal niya is more link and more goal niya is to develop a social interest or sense of social interest. Okay? So, that's it. That's all kay Adler nga theory. So, okay pa? So, 4:37, we still have an hour. Okay? So, let's proceed now to Carl Jung. So, for more details, like I said, read your book and then you will somehow at least kung balikan yun yung lecture, at least may do supplement kamo sa natun-an ninyo or nabasahan ninyo. Okay, so let's proceed to Jung's analytical psychology. So let me start with a quote by Carl Jung. My life story of the self-realization of the unconscious. My life is a story of the self-realization of the unconscious. Everything in the unconscious seeks outward manifestation, and the personality too desires to evolve out of its unconscious conditions. So, later on, explain ko na later on ang ginamini yung, pero it's all about the unconscious gapon and how it manifests it to us. So, si Jung, though friends man sila ni Freud, but he decided like Adler, to separate and create his own theory due to may ara man siya reklamo sa theory ni Freud. Okay? So, ang kay Jung, clear difference nila between kay Jung kag kay Freud is that si Freud focused on the childhood development, meanwhile kay Jung focused on the middle adult, okay, ang middle and late stages of life, where one actually achieves self-actualization. So, it's a very hopeful theory, and para sa iya, man is gradually becoming, through the ages, a better and more civilized human being operating in a better frame of reference. So, balikan later. So, Jung preferred the word psyche, which means spirit or soul, and it also suggests the integration of all aspects of personality. And according to Jung, total personality or psyche is composed of several systems or structure that can influence one another. So, i-differentiate ang kay Freud kay Jung, ha? So, again, according kay Freud, childhood development is the most important. Kay Jung, middle ages and late adulthood stages. Okay? Tapos, para kay Freud, divided ang personality. May separate yun ni entity, ang id, ego, kag superego. According naman kay Jung, although there are a lot or may mga subsystem or structures ang aton nga personality, they also influence one another, just like sa id, ego, and superego. Pero ang sa iya nga perspective is that during the Middle Ages, nai-integrate yung ating systems or structures of personality into one, which is called psyche, and that's where we can achieve self-actualization, which is ara sa Middle Ages nga part. So, main tenet. So, ang iya main tenet is that each of us is motivated not only by repressed experiences, but also by certain emotionally toned experiences inherited from our ancestor. So, anong ibig sabihin nito? We are all motivated not only because we have our unconscious experiences, personal unconscious experiences nga repressed, but also may ara kita inherit nga mga unconscious motivations from our ancestors. And this is what he calls the collective unconscious. Okay? So, let's go now to key terms. So, let's go to the levels of psyche. Kung si Freud, ang iya levels of psyche, may conscious and unconscious. So, siya man, may levels of psyche. May conscious man, kag unconscious. But, in him, ang unconscious is divided further into two parts. So, our personal unconscious and our collective unconscious. So, when we say conscious, these are images are those that are sensed by the ego, whereas unconscious elements have no relationship with the ego. So, what now then is the ego? So, the ego is the center of consciousness. Kung kay Freud, ang ego niya is the center of reality or personality, sa kay Jung, the ego is the center of our consciousness and it's not the core of our personality. So, the ego is with the conscious mind, meaning it senses reality man. It is the part concerned with perceiving, thinking, feeling, and remembering. It is the person's awareness of himself and is responsible for carrying out normal activities of waking life, gatekeeper of the consciousness, as it acts in a selective way, admitting into conscious awareness only a portion of the stimuli to which the person is exposed. So the ego is also the center of an individual's will, enabling him to strive for conscious goals. And may ginatawag si Jung na ego inflation, wherein one overly focused on the ego and identifying too closely with one's conscious experiences and intentions, especially in the first half of life, which puts the person out of balance. So, ang ego inflation, though, in a way, do pride, in a way, do nagiging prideful ang tao, nagiging egoistic siya because of ang iya overly identify siya sa iyang conscious experiences and intention, especially during the first half, meaning from childhood to young adulthood, though more egoistic kita. Okay? So, when we say naman personal unconscious, it embraces all repressed, forgotten, or subliminally perceived experiences of one particular individual. So, this is our own unconscious. And this is anything which is not presently conscious but can be made conscious anytime. So, it's also like ang kay Freud nga pre-conscious. So, it also includes both memories that are easily brought to mind and those that have been forgotten or suppressed for years. So, this focuses on information not vivid, repressed, or forgotten, but are easily recalled. So, what makes up our personal unconscious? So, it's the complexes. So, when we say complex, it is a core or pattern of emotions, memories, perceptions, and wishes organized around the common theme. It is also the preoccupation of a certain theme that directs thoughts and behaviors in various ways, thus determining how the person perceives the world. So, these are emotionally toned conglomeration of associated ideas. So, ang example ko sang complex is, for example, when you hear the word mother, anong first nga comes sa mind nyo? So, kung mother, diba, caring, mother, provider, diba? Mother is, pwede, for example, kung may bad experiences ka sa mother mo, so, mother is abusive, diba? Pwede man nga tamaan ka disciplinarian, authoritative, diba? Authoritarian. So, these are emotionally toned associations or ideas. Okay? So, these are all ang ato nga complexes, these are all what makes our view of the world, and of course this also helps in explaining why we act the way we did. Okay? So it is called, ang aton nga mga emotions, memories, and perceptions, these are all organized in a common theme. So, like I said, tong word nga mother, anong gasulod sa utok ninyo? So, either mga memories mo about your mother, 'di ba? Ang mga what is your initial perception of what a mother should be, 'di ba? Mga wishes mo of ano dapat ang mother. So, these are all complexes. So, like I said, kay Jung, he did not stop lang sa personal unconscious, but he also add the collective unconscious. So, ano na siya? So, the collective unconscious is roots in the ancestral past of the entire species. Physical contents of the collective unconscious are inherited and passed on from one generation to the next as a psychic potential. So, ano daan, medyo into mysticism daan si Jung. So, that's why he said that may mga ancestral past kita nga gakapasa sa aton here in the present that also motivates our own behaviors in the present moment. So, collective unconscious is also known as the psychic inheritance. So, it is a reservoir of man's experiences as species, a kind of knowledge people are all born with. And this is the deepest and least accessible level of psyche. Okay, so, ang example ko da is that, for example, sa personal unconscious mo, syempre, you have a bad experience with your mother, so yung mga perceptions mo of being a mother is bad, mo do ka authoritarian, or pwede mo mabaga neglectful ang imo nga term sa mother, ang imo nga perception of what a mother is, neglectful kay tungod sa imo nga gin-grow up and mga memories mo about your own mother. Pero, and you said to yourself nga, okay, hindi gid ko yung magkabata, daw mo na. Pero, for example, what if nabusong ka, tapos nagkaroon ka ng anak? So, tapos gulpi na lang nag-kick in, bala ang daw motherly instinct mo. So, ang explanation na ni Jung is that these are from our collective unconscious. Kumbaga, these are psychic potentials that have been passed on from generation. So, meaning, halin pa sa ancestors mo, may mga motherly instinct ang mga tao, ang mga women na may bata, 'di ba? Kay it's part of their collective unconscious, okay? So, Jung expanded further collective unconscious and he coined the term archetypes. So, archetypes are ancient or archaic images that derive from the collective unconscious. Okay, so, these are unlearned tendency to experience things in a certain way, or ang mga archetypes niya na, these are contents of the collective unconscious. So, if you remember, ang hambal ko to bala nga pag sang bago ka bata, tapos gulpi lang nag-kick-in ando motherly instinct mo, because according kay Freud, you inherited the great mother nga archetype. So, ang great mother nga archetype, nang do, the archetype that either is, nurturing or, neglectful, doon mo na. So, these are all passed on to us from our ancestors. So, these are all psychic potential. So, an instinct naman yan is an unconscious physical impulse towards an action, and so the archetype as a psychic counterpart to an instinct. So, ang tong ginatawag ko nga motherly instinct, okay, sa archetype, ang equivalent yun na is ang great mother. Okay? So, what are the different types of archetypes? So, the first one is our persona. So, our persona is the side of personality that people show to the world. So, it's man's public image. It is our external self. the mask that a person puts before he shows himself to the outside world. So, the face that you're seeing today, this is my persona. Okay, this is not truly who I am. Okay, this is not this is not just one part of me. Okay, so this is just one part of me. May other pa ko nga parts, which wala akong gina-show sa inyo because this is my teacher persona. Okay, so another nga pwede ko nga analogy is that since may VTuber, kung into VTubing ka mo, so usually ang mga VTubers, they wore a mask, which is their VTuber avatar, and then they try to act like in the lore of their VTuber avatar. So that is their persona, pero behind the camera, they are really different. Okay, so persona. So I hope nga clear sa inyo, okay? So next is shadow. So shadow archetype is the archetype of darkness, and repression. It represents those qualities we do not wish to acknowledge but attempt to hide from ourselves and others. So, sex and their life instinct in general, the dark side of the ego and the evil that people are capable of is often stored here, unwanted part of the body. It is the repressed part of the person's life. So, ng mga inner naton nga mga insecurities, inner naton nga evilness na sometimes hindi natin na-realize na capable pala tayo of making it, and we try to hide it from others and ourselves. So, mga toxic traits na bala nga we also recognize, but we do not want others to know about it. So, anima and animus. So, anima is the feminine side of men. It originates in the collective unconscious as an archetype and remains extremely resistant to consciousness. So, the animus, on the other hand, is the masculine archetype in women. So, another is, the anima may be personified as a young girl, very spontaneous and intuitive, or as a witch, or as a Mother Earth. Animus may be personified as a wise old man, or often a number of males, and tends to be logical, often rationalistic, even argumentative. So, each of us, men and women, men has an anima too, or may feminine side sila, and women have their animus too, or the masculine side of them. So, diba, before, sa una, ginahambalanta nga ang mga lalaki dapat amo lang ning ila nga pwede ubrahon, 'di ba? But ang aton nga view of what's masculine is changing, 'di ba? So we can say that men also have a compassionate side, 'di ba? Hindi lang ang pagiging strong or amo nang do typical nga perception of what man should be. So that, according to Jung, that is the manifestation of the anima. So same man sa girls or sa women. So hindi lang motherly, hindi lang nurturing ang capable sa women. They are also capable of being logical, rational, okay, or even argumentative. So, ang story behind anima and animus, so, paano na-discover ni Jung ang iya nga own nga anima? It's because ginabother siya permisang dreams siya when he was 40 years old. Ginabother siya permisang dreams of a woman. Hindi niya maintindihan kung na ang woman nga nagakadto sa iya nga dreams until na-realize na that is his anima or his feminine side. Okay? So, the Great Mother naman, it is the pre-existing concept of mother that is always associated with both positive and negative feelings. It represents two opposing factors, fertility and nourishment on the one hand, and power and destruction on the other. Okay, so that's why like I said sa example kagina, ang though motherly instinct naton may come from our collective unconscious of the archetype Great Mother. Ang wise old man naman, is the archetype of wisdom and meaning. It symbolizes humans' pre-existing knowledge of the mysteries of life. So, the hero naman is represented in mythology and legends as a powerful person, sometimes part god who fights against great odds to conquer or vanquish evil in the form of dragons, monsters, serpents, or demons. So, ang pwede ko din nga example is, sometimes people, di ba, they have that hero instinct that they want to save everyone, though they would do everything to save their family, their status in life, di ba, like, sometimes do ka martyr, like, bala sa ilang mga heroes, di ba? So, maybe that is coming from or stemming from their hero archetype, from their collective unconscious. And of course, there is the self. So, the self is the most important archetype. So, the self, each person possesses an inherited tendency to move towards growth, perfection, and completion. Archetype, it is the archetype of archetypes. It includes both the conscious and unconscious mind, and it unites the opposing elements of the psyche. So, ang self nga munang ginatawag ni Jung nga daw psyche ta. And mag-abot kita mga sa middle age according to him. This is where all of those archetypes naton, ang aton personal unconscious, all integrate into one self naton. So, the process nga of integrating these different archetypes is called self-realization. So, that this is the process that pulls together the other archetypes. So, the self is also representing the transcendence of all opposites, so that every aspect of the personality is expressed equally through developing the self, results to self-realization. So, ang ginamin diri is that the self is composed of opposites. Kumaga, para sa Great Mother, may ara sang destruction, may ara sang nurturing. Ang self naton is also composed of our persona and our shadow. Kumaga, opposite siya, it is always in pair. So, this is the new center, nagiging new center siya, and a more balanced position for the psyche. So, dynamics of personality. So, si Jung, he is more on causality and teleology, ang do motivation natin sa aton nga behavior. Progression is the adaptation to the outside world. It involves forward flow of psychic energy. So, later on, this progression nga term, this will affect, for example, what is our personality type later on. So, if more on ka sa outside world, you spend time more on the outside world, you have that dynamic called progression. Meanwhile, ang regression naman niya, you are adapting to your inner world, and it relies on the backward flow of psychic energy. So, amo naman ang later on makita yung introversion. Okay? So, what are the psychological types? So, attitude, it is the predisposition to act or react in a characteristic direction. Okay? So, there are two kinds of attitudes, introversion and extraversion. So, when we say introversion, this is turning inward of psychic energy with an orientation toward the subjective. So, more on leaning towards the self siya, and more on leaning towards your subjective view of reality. Sa extraversion naman niya, this attitude is distinguished by turning outward of psychic energy so that the person is oriented towards the objective and away from objective. So, sa extraversion, more leaning toward reality siya, of objective reality. So, more definition. So, extraversion, the attitude of the psyche characterized by an orientation towards the external world and other people. They are open, sociable, socially assertive, and prefer the external world, things, peoples, and activities. So, mas leaning on sila sa mga adventures, sa mga meeting new people, ng extraversion nga attitude. Ang introversion naman, the attitude of the psyche characterized by an orientation towards one's thoughts and feelings, withdrawn and often shy, tend to focus on themselves, and they prefer their internal world of thoughts, feelings, fantasies, and dreams. So, nang mga makita nyo kung kisa nga may SM, kung anong SM, may sariling mundo. So, in a way, ako man, may SM man ko kasi since I'm an introvert. So, though, na ang explanation ni Freud when it comes to attitudes. So, of course, it's not only just the attitudes that he put into, but also the function. When we say function, this is of course the how aware we are or ang different na functioning naton, whether more on thinking kita, feeling kita, or sensing or intuiting. So unahon ta na ang thinking kag feeling. So when we say thinking, it is the thinking na function, it is the logical, intellectual activity that produces chain of ideas. So this is our rational function, okay? So it involves decision making or judging rather than simple intake of information, evaluating information or ideas rationally or logically. So feeling naman niya describes the process of evaluating an idea or event. So sa feeling, there are rational matter of evaluating information, this time by weighing one's emotional response. So si thinking more on the logical, the practical. So si thinking more on the logical, more on the rational. Meanwhile, si feeling is more on how does he or she value something, an idea or event. So, of course, there are two different kinds of functioning sa each nga function. So, may introverted thinking kag may extroverted thinking. Pero later talang i-discuss ina. So, sensation naman. What is sensation? So, or sensing. So, this function that receives physical stimuli and transmit them to perceptual consciousness. So, this is an irrational function. It involves perception rather than judging or information getting of information by means of the senses. So, usually yung those nga may high sa sensation, they like activities that stimulate their senses. They like, for example, adventures, or they like music, for example, anything that they can sense doon ng ilang nga namian or ang function nga ara sa ilang. Sorry again. Dali lang gid class ha.
It's all right, ma'am.
That was my dog. Nga si Catriona. Very attached siya daan sa akon. So, gusto niya get permis sa room. So, very pagwa ko sa. So, if ever nga do mabatian ka mo nga sound, nga do ginanak yung door na siya na. Si Catriona. So, oo, as in gid ya. Do kalanlan nga ara gid ko permit. Oh, pangalan namon siya kay Catriona Gray. No na. Oo. Lugid saya taman ka na. So if you hear her nga barking na gusto niya na magpasulod pero Di lang wala daw sa gatambay malang na siya dayon. Sige. So next, let's proceed. So okay na. Pero mabatian nyo siya based sa mic or hindi man. A bit. Pero hindi man disturbing.
It's fine now.
Okay, sige. Kay dog, naman, na-set ko man ni mic kung ado maano ang external noises. Okay, sige. So, next is, intuition, di ba? So, or intuiting. So, it involves perception beyond the working of consciousness. So, this is also irrational or perceptual but comes from complex integration of large amount of information rather than simple hearing or seeing the kind of perceptions that work outside of the usual conscious process. So, kumaga, these are, ang intuition, paano ko siya ma-put into words man? May intuition, intuiting mo ako daan yung personality mo. So, sa intuiting, they can make connections bala into seemingly not kung ang person more on sa sensation, hindi nila makita ang connection between these different ideas. Pero kung sa intuiting ka nga type, so mo na, you are able to make guesses, make hunches. So siguro that's why ang mga theorists siguro in a way may interesting sila nga side kay they are able to create a theory. Okay? So, sige. So, there are different, introverted, kumaga, ang function, ang attitudes niya can be combined with it. So, may ara nga, introverted thinking, kag may extroverted thinking, may extroverted sensing, may introverted sensing. So, ang best siguro nga way ko ni nga ma-present is through the MBTI. Okay, so have you heard of the MBTI or Myers-Briggs Type Indicator? Okay, some of you, yes. Okay, ang iba, yes. Do ginapakita, do amo na ganing subong ang new nga, kung ma-describe ko ni do amo ning zodiac signs ang psych. So, before it was a valid and reliable na test. But now, hindi na siya valid and reliable. Kay, hindi siya, kay may mga factors, like for example, sa theory mismo ni Jung, nga daw, hindi nila ma-replicate, hindi nila ma-prove. Okay, so, wala gawa researches about his theory. So, amo na nga nagdubo man ang so different. So, ari kadto lang kamo digali if gusto nyo to learn your MBTI. So, kadto lang kamo di para and pila ni ka question, 60 questions. So, just answer them and then let me know what is your MBTI. So, I encourage gali nga pwede nyo gin ma-include ang MBTI ninyo sa sa nga case analysis ninyo sa psychobiography ninyo. Oo. So, amo pa gin ng rason na hindi siya reliable kag valid kay amo na galain-lain ang inyong results. So, ang iban from INTP, for example, sa akong biga, INTP, ga INFJ ko, nagasuli siya bala. So, it depends man. But like I said, may T. Anong galing T kung sa nalipat kung meaning sang T. So, do expansion pag ginagani sang MBTI. So, ano ba inyo nga, MBTI if you are aware of your MBTI? So, those na nakakuha. So, besides kay Rania. INFJA, ISFJT. Puro ka mo mga introverted ba? INFPT. Amo na siguro, ka mo, quiet. Nalipas. Sige lang, kuha ka lang sang bag-o. Okay, INF. Puro tagali di introvert. Lol. So, mga introverted, wala, di extroverted, di sinyo? So, ang section nga ni Gali, very introverted. So, hopefully, hindi ka mo maging shy, ha? I know may shyness, nga factor. Pero hopefully, mag-present ka mo, hindi lang ka mo maghuya-huya. So, develop nyo dapat confidence nyo. Kay one day, you will work, so you really need to, or you are going to be forced to develop that skill, gid nga kailangan na maging confident ka sa self mo. So, tanawon ta ang different kinds of personality. 16. Kumaga 16 types siya. Okay, so anong possible? Kumaga these are all mixed and match. Okay? So ang na lang ay Okay. So, Ari, kung Ari lang do short lang ning nga form. Short form, MBTI. So, are you inwardly or outwardly focused? So, amo nang introversion or extroversion. So, kung i-describe ko being introversion kag extroversion, ang introversion is kung ara ka sa fish pond. Okay, if your mind is a fish pond, kumbaga, damo fish sa mo na nga fish pond. Gets, fish bowl. Okay, if your mind is a fish bowl, so, ang introvert is damo fishes sa iya nga fish bowl. Okay, meanwhile, ang extroversion, syempre, wala sang fish sa fish bowl, kay tungod nga outside sila. Wala sila sa fish bowl, ara sila sa ocean. Okay. Did I somehow na-connect nyo? Ang akon nga. Ara sila sa outside world, wala sila sa fishbowl. Okay, so amo na ang difference between extrovert and introvert. So wala sila sa fishbowl, ato sila sa ocean. So amo ning different types, 16 types. So it depends kung whether ang attitudes are ang extroversion, introversion. Tapos ang tatlo nga ni, these are all functions naton. So, sensing, intuition, thinking, feeling, and judger, and perceiving. So, mga different niya nga descriptions, diba? So, you can always use this gali class when you do your psychobiography and also your case analysis. So, if you read my case analysis kay Loki, do somehow nagamit ko sang MBTI. Okay? Sige, so balik na ta kay Arpa. So, yeah. Okay, so I think this is the last na siguro. So, stages of development ni Jung. Okay? So, like I said, ang stages of development niya, mas ga-focus siya sa development sang middle adult. Okay, sang middle adulthood. So, if you remember your dev psych, so mga middle adulthood are sa 40s to 60s, di ba? And, amo ning iya nga description sa stages of development. So, from dawn, di ba? Dawn ang early morning, doon man ang childhood. And then, nagkadto sa center or noon, amo nang aton nga young adolescent stage. And then, ang sa next naman niya, ang middle life, ang dusk, pakadto ka na sa dusk. Okay, so, ang stages of development niya are as follows. So, sa childhood, there is a little more than reflection of the parent's personality. So, kumbaga wala pa sang own sense of self ang bata because we try to mimic our parents. The consciousness forms when the child is able to say I, or when the child becomes able to distinguish between himself and other people, objects, and in the world. So, That's why may ara sang anarchic phase, which is the chaotic and sporadic consciousness. Buslingon, wala pa di ka-develop sang sense of I or ego ang bata. Sa monarchic phase, this is characterized by development of the ego and by beginning of logical and verbal thinking. So this is when the child already able to distinguish himself from others. So, sa teenage to young adulthood, there is psychic birth or first transition. The psychic assumes a definite form and content marked by difficulties and need to adapt. So the aim of life is to achieve goals and establish a secure, successful place for oneself of the world. So there is an increased activity, maturing sexuality, growing consciousness, and recognition. So, kumaga, diri na ga-realize sang tao, sang adolescent, kag sang adult nga, their childhood is gone forever and they need to, they need to focus on achieving their goals and establishing a secure and successful place in society. Okay, so amo man na nga gaka-pressure man kita as young adults and as young adults kay siguro young adults na kita no, more than 18 naman kita. So yeah, so that's why people get depression because they need to adapt, 'di ba, sa mga life's changes. And of course, ang problem-free era of child, kung wala na kita parents that would cover us. Okay. So sa middle life naman, okay, this is the time of personal crisis. So this is the second transition daw. The shift of focus on the objective world of reality from education, career, and family to one's inner subjective world that had earlier been neglected. So this is when one naturally begins the process of self-actualization to a new level of positive psychological health called individuation. So, although this decline can be present in middle-aged people with increasing anxieties, middle life is also a period of tremendous potential. So, if you remember your developmental psychology, di ba, may ginatawag nga midlife crisis. Because, since ang aton nga youth, pakadto sa aton young adulthood, we are striving sa external realities naton, di ba, is doing well sa school, finding work, finding someone to love, to establish a family, di ba? So, once nga na-achieve mo na be, though like, you say to yourself, okay, what's next? What's next in my life? So, mo man naguro ang na-experience ni Jung. That's why he created this theory. Nagkaroon siya ng midlife crisis. So, hindi siya kabalo kung anong obrahon niya. So, like I said, it's a period of, it's a second transition. And at the same time, this is a period of tremendous potential. So, the person, once nga na-integrate niya ng self niya or he experienced self-realization and individuation. So, dara niya ma-experience ang tremendous potential niya as a person. So, also, self-realization here or individuation, that is the process of becoming an individual or whole person. Okay, so it's the process of restoring wholeness to the psyche in an adult development, and the goal is to move the center of personality from the ego to some midpoint between ego and the unconscious. So, amo ning ginahambal ko sa inyo nga ang personal unconscious mo, ang collective unconscious mo, ang mga archetypes na nag-evolve siya into one nga being, which is the self. Okay? So, ang old age naman, people experience a diminution of consciousness just as the light and warmth of the sun diminish at dusk. So, yeah. I think that's it. That's all for my lecture for this afternoon. Okay, sige. So, before I check your attendance, do you have any questions, concern regarding sa ni Adler, theory ni Adler and ni Jung? Okay, yes?
Ma'am, question lang po.
Okay.
Since si Adler, you mentioned kanina na focused on theological views, meaning very, parang, in a way, his theories are based on ano din, no? Religious beliefs. Is that one of the reason why parang nagko-collide sila ni Sigmund Freud? Because
I
di ba
mentioned
sexual
siguro
development?
teleological, hindi theological, sorry gid.
Sorry.
Teleological, but silingon ang future, sorry gid sa pronunciation ko. Kung na-confuse ka mo. Oo. So, si Freud ba lang naman, atheist siya despite being Jewish, so, amo na yung views, pessimistic view self. So, si Adler, more optimistic siya, so, more focused on the future siya rather than the past. So, wala siya ga-agree kay Freud nga ang childhood mo determine sa present mo nga behavior and you will stay that way forever. Do mo na. So, saya do more hopeful siya. Do kontahan na gid siya ni Freud. Okay? Did I answer your question? Sorry, gid. Kung sa lahat.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry kung na-confuse ka sa ko. Pronunciation. Sige. Ano pag-ed pa may concerns pa ka mo? Okay, wala naman. So, sige, reminder lang sa present ang first 4 presenters naton. So, don't forget to send your drafts. So, don't worry kung do sabog pang draft ninyo. Basta naka-PowerPoint lang. Send nyo lang sa akon sa Canvas or sa email ko. Okay, so, basta hindi lang kamo mag-send sa Sunday, kaya sigurado hindi ko na makita by Sunday because, naka-blocker ako nga browser, so, ginablock ko gid ang emails kung Sunday. Sorry, gid. So, so, as much as possible sa Saturday, send yun na para at least I can reply dayon para mabutangan yung changes. Okay, so, also, reminder ang matrix ninyo. So, it's okay lang if malate sa deadline, basta importante ma-send. Okay, so, anyways, wala naman iban nga may concern. Sige, so check ko ng attendance ninyo. So, please say present if your name is